Colleen, welcome to the Your Sorority Journey podcast. We are so excited to have you be a part of our recruitment takeover.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here, Cassie. Really appreciate you taking the time to invite me to join you.
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean, Fired Up has such an up close and personal relationship with potential new members. When we were thinking about Future Sister Takeover, we were like, we got to get Colleen on to have a great conversation about what it looks like to be a potential new member, like how some of those lived experiences are different than our other stakeholders in the recruitment process, and really validate potential members. We hope you feel so validated in the next 30 minutes that we have with you all of the stressors and anxieties. But before we get into all that, Colleen, would you just introduce yourself for us and tell us a little bit about your sorority journey and what's motivated you to stay in this field?
Gosh, sure. So I'm Colleen Blevins. I am the Senior Director of Training at Fired Up. We are a company who is dedicated to helping organizations grow. And I kind of found my way here through working in higher education. I joined my organization, ADPi, at the University of Kansas in 2002. And I've kind of worked in recruitment in particular since I joined.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. I was a student leader on my campus. I helped oversee recruitment from the Panhellenic side for 2 years. After that, I kind of was like, gosh, my chosen field where I got my bachelor's degree in is journalism. And I kind of don't want to do that. Yeah, I'm like, what's next? So I went and I got my master's degree in higher education at the University of South Carolina, made my way up the Eastern Seaboard working in higher ed. I worked in fraternity and sorority life at George Mason. I worked for ACPA for a year, Higher Education Association, started moving west a little bit, spent some time at Xavier University, Miami of Ohio. I was there for 6 years and oversaw their fraternity and sorority community, running their huge Panhellenic recruitment process. And now we moved even further west. I live in Arizona. And when I moved here, I was looking for a new opportunity. And this position at Fired Up was open. And all throughout my journey, sorority recruitment kind of was in the middle of it. And I just loved helping organizations find the right members for them and also helping PNMs find the right place for them too. My sorority recruitment process was up and down. It was not perfect. And I don't think any process is perfect. And I wanted,
totally.
Right. And I wanted PNMs to know that you might go in thinking one thing, but the end of the process is where you end up is where you're supposed to be. And it's kind of where I found my home, and kind of why I found my way into working in fraternity and sorority life is because of my experience. And so I wanted to work in an area that really emphasized finding the right place for you, and that there are multiple places you could call home, but what is the right home for you, and really figuring out how we could dive deep and helping organizations find the right members for them and helping PNMs find the right organization for them. So that's what kind of led me to Fired Up and the work we do, and helping organizations and chapters, communities, and PNMs just have a really strong and great recruitment process.
That's so good. And I love that, when we have a difficult or turbulent experience or a positive experience, right? I think one of the coolest ways that we can respond to that is to brainstorm how we can prevent that turbulent experience from repeating itself, or how to sustain that positive experience. My potential new member journey was also really unexpected and challenging. And I, maybe you wouldn't have thought man, if you're gonna have such a challenging experience, wouldn't you just run from the whole experience? But sometimes that invitation in is so exciting. And I just love that too, of there's a lot of places that you can end up. And sometimes having an open mind about that and recognizing that a lot of the work that you do is on the other side of this experience with the chapters, helping them recognize their values, their priorities, and how to attract the right potential new members and invite them to join what they're doing. And sometimes as a potential new member, we don't see fully that experience or that behind the scenes. So it's hard to be well, why am I continuing to go back to this chapter when I keep ranking them at the bottom of my list, right?
That was my experience.
And I think that's what's hard is it's hard to remember that they might see something in us given the chapters broader sense of understanding of sorority membership and their strategic priorities. that you actually have, and could be an awesome contributor to, but you just don't see that yet.
100%. And I think if I wouldn't have joined the chapter that I joined, I wouldn't be where I am today. The same,
Oh, me either.
it's like the same opportunities would not have presented themselves. And the other chapters I thought I was interested in. And those chapters are wonderful. Some of my greatest friends joined those chapters, but they honestly weren't right for me. I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be, and I didn't know it at the time. I wouldn't have gone on this journey. I wouldn't be talking to you today, Cassie, if it weren't for my chapter, the sisters I met in that chapter who pushed me. And so I think that that's also what leads part of my passion, is that the unexpected can really help change your life for the better. And I'm so indebted to the women who pushed me and challenged me to say yes, and challenged me to like have an open mind. And that's what I love about recruitment, and I love about supporting PNMs in this process, is just challenging them to just take one step that makes them a little bit uncomfortable, because you don't know what that step's going to lead, what, journey and path it's going to lead you down. So
that concept of being indebted to all the women who, or just like people in your life who came before you that encourage you to say yes. My person is my recruitment counselor. When I think about that, on a day that and I've told this recruitment story on this podcast several times, but on a day that I should have gone or could have gone to 6 chapters, I was invited back to 2. And it wasn't that I didn't like those 2 chapters. I just felt like my whole autonomy was taken from me in the process. And the encouragement that my recruitment counselor spoke over me and what I had to offer those chapters and what they might have seen in me gave me so much hope and encouragement in a really stressful situation where I feel like I lost all control. And I feel like language that we often hear around that, when we are constantly getting back chapters that are at the bottom of our list, or we just feel like we've like lost autonomy of our own recruitment process, we hear all the time, trust the process.
TTP, trust the process.
What do you think about that advice?
I think in the moment it's hard to hear, don't tell me to trust the process when I have, and then it didn't work out how I wanted, and I like, that's how I felt. I was like, but it didn't work how I wanted. And you're telling me to trust, and I think when we say it is well-intentioned, that statement of trust the process is so well-intentioned, because ultimately you and I did at the end of the day. But when someone was telling me that, I rolled my eyes, and I know I was crying, and I'm like, you're telling me to trust the process. And I did. And now it doesn't feel fair. But I think when we say that, it's so well-intentioned, and that we know it worked out for us, but it's hard for a PNM to hear that. I know it was hard for me to hear that.
Totally.
But I would love for PNMs to know of where that intention comes from, and that it comes from a place of care. And the sorority recruitment process is so worth it, that just give it one more round, one more event. Rather than saying trust the process, it's try one more,
I love that.
One step further. And I say it all the time too. I'm like, just trust the process. And it's hard to trust sometimes. It really is, when it hasn't worked out how we wanted. And so now I say, just take one more step, one more time, just go say hi to one more person. And if that person or that step wasn't the right one, then let's talk about it after. And so, it's like, gosh, I believe in trust the process, because I did, even when I rolled my eyes and I was like begrudgingly, but I understand in the moment when PNMs feel like some type of way about those 3 words,
or kind of even to that their emotions have been dismissed in that experience, right? And so I think for all potential members, hear this: the next person who tells you to trust the process, remember a couple things. One, just like let that go in one ear and out the other, and just take one more step, right? I think like that's like, just train your brain to think a different way and give that person a ton of grace, because like Colleen said, they are so well-intended. And I think another thing that's important for us to remember, and we can have a whole nother conversation with the other side of the recruitment process about those words, is I think sometimes we forget how vulnerable we were at that one time before we had letters associated with who we are, right? And even though there's like confidence that we want to instill in potential members, that like you will find a home in this community, right? Like there is space for you if you are like aligned with the values and priorities of our community. Like there is room for you here. And I think we can forget sometimes that can be said over and over and over, but it doesn't change the fact that it's not true yet. Like it doesn't change the fact that it
100%.
hasn't come through to fruition.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think it's really important to remember that, you know, you and I were just talking, and sometimes it's really important to remember as potentially members that chapters are just as nervous as you
100%.
are, because
Yes.
they are trying, like we need to tell them just the same, trust the process. Like the right potential members will come to you. But that doesn't change the fact that they know where their home is, and potentially members don't yet.
Right. Right. And our P&Ms are still trying to find their home and even discover if sorority is for them. You know, we still have people who sign up and they aren't sure. And that's okay to be uncertain and to be unsure, because I think that college is the greatest time to try things and to things and to figure out what's right for you and what's not right for you. And sometimes in the recruitment process, you're still figuring that out. Is sorority life for me? I think it could be for anyone. I know it could be for anyone, but it's up to you to determine if it is right for you. So,
yeah. And I think that's such a good sentiment too, for anyone listening who's on the fence about sorority. Give it a shot. Like if you're on the fence, like the worst thing that happens is you're a couple days in and you decide, hey, thank you for the opportunity. I don't think this is the right fit. That is okay. It is, you are allowed to say no. You have control over your involvement in the process. And maybe that's just a word of encouragement that someone needs to hear today, of like, you have that in your control. And I got to the place ultimately when I felt like I was losing control of my process, that I wanted to be in the Panhellenic community more than I cared about which letters I was associated with, which is not everyone's opinion or perspective, but at the end of the day, that's how I felt about my particular chapter. And I think it's so important to remember that, like, if you don't feel that way at the end, if you would rather not be a part of the Panhellenic community throughout any point in the process, I hope that you're able to leave knowing that you have a friend in the Panhellenic community and they're like for you and like for women on campus, but you don't have to like push yourself into an environment that you're not comfortable with.
No, absolutely. I remember my preference day kind of sounds very similar to your experience of, you know, getting 2 chapters back. Going into preference, I was released from my first, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice, I think it was, you know, and so I got those like bottom 2 choices. And when I went to the chapter I ended up joining, there was someone in there who sat down next to me and she's like, honestly, Colleen, whether you join or not, of course, I want you to join, but it's your choice and you need to do what's right for you. But I'll always be here. Like we can still be friends, whether you choose to join or not. And that when you talked about autonomy earlier, sometimes we feel like that's taken away. But in that moment, I felt like it was given back to me. Like I did have that choice. I could say yes or I could say no. And these women that I was talking to still wanted to be friends with me, whether I joined or not. They respected my decision and respected my choice. And that ultimately led me to say, well, I want to join them. Well, wow, they're giving me that choice. They're saying, whatever you choose, we respect. I felt respected. I felt seen. And that autonomy was given back to me. And, you know, I think it was the first time in the whole process where I really felt like I owned my own process, where I could choose and I could make that choice and it wasn't being made for me. And she said to me, and if I could have P&Ms walk away with anything, it's that you do own your experience. You do get that choice, and find those people that are going to want to be friends with you no matter what letters you're wearing, whether you're wearing them or not. That's how I knew that it was okay for me to join and to say yes to that chapter. So I think owning my, like getting ownership back of my own process, it allowed me to say, okay, it is still right for me. So
yes. And I think that's like what it comes down to more often than not, is when we see how people respond to our like fear, anxiety, turmoil, and they reveal themselves to be people that we want in our corner, it's like, okay, I'm able to surrender some of that autonomy all of a sudden because I want to be associated with you. You were, just a few minutes ago, we were talking about all the different things that potentially members are trying to like discover about themselves and
Yeah.
their like college experience. And I think like 18, let's say like our average potential new member, it's like probably really high around like 18 years old, but like we got 19, 20, 21, like in that range. I think one of like my biggest motivators in working in sorority is just serving women between the ages of 18 and 24, because that time of your life is so much self-discovery, right? Figuring out
100%.
who you are and what
Absolutely.
matters to you. And I know you guys have a program called I Value where you like kind of get an like sneak peek into what matters to potentially members going into recruitment. What's some of the like most interesting data that you've seen from that assessment?
Gosh, yeah. Cassie, I dove into that this spring. I was like, we have surveyed thousands of potential new members. And this past year, it was over 6,200 PNMs. And they take this iValue, it's valuesbracket.com, and they take this survey of what matters to you. We don't define the values. It's, you'll see family, love, friendship, kindness, and everyone's going to define each of those words a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But it helps our PNMs really discover, when we talk about being values-based organizations, we're social Greek letter organizations who are rooted deeply in things that matter behind a purpose and values. And if we ask our PNMs, if we ask you as a PNM, what do you value? When you're like, gosh, I don't know if I've really been truly asked that question. This allows PNMs to take a deep breath in a safe space and really dive into what does matter to me.
Yeah.
And when we've created this structured recruitment process, Cassie, where it's, some campuses will have an open house day and we'll have a sisterhood day and a philanthropy day. And we say, these align with the values of our community. But then I look at what over 6,000 PNM said they actually value. And, it doesn't necessarily align with what we say our communities. I mean, it does align, but sometimes it's hard to see how it aligns. So nowhere in our, top 10 of our PNM values do people say, I value philanthropy, or
Sure.
I value sisterhood.
Because
we
what
define
is sisterhood? Yeah,
But
totally.
honestly, when I was 18, I have a brother and I have a lot of male cousins and very few female cousins. I couldn't really define for you what sisterhood meant to me at that moment. I could define for you friendship and family and love. And ironically, those are the top three things that
friendship, family, and love. Those are the top three.
So when we look at like the top 10 semifinalist values of over 60 values that PNMs look at, family, love, friendship are the top three that came up most often. When we look at that, and that it's like, how do we then, if I know as a PNM that family, love, friendship means so much to me, how do I then reflect on my recruitment process and find that in the chapters that I'm visiting? Like they have this philanthropy day. Well, how does that align with family, love, friendship? How do I find that in what they do and how they give back? Or in sisterhood day, oh, that could align with friendship. To me, I define sisterhood as a deep friendship, right? And so then how do I see that show up and how they, and I sometimes will tell PNMs, just take a look around the room and how people are interacting in the moments between conversations.
Yes.
Are those
great advice,
right? Like, are those interactions genuine? And can you see like little side comments and jokes and between sisters and smiles? And when I see that comfort level outside of the choreographed, conversations, and here's our speech and here's our chapter and let me welcome you in, because that it feels practiced. And it is, you practice it so that, because Cassie, like PNMs aren't the only ones that are nervous. Like chapter members are nervous too. Like we've got chapters next week that are going to start jumping into practicing for recruitment so that they're prepared. Right. And so, but it's the moments in between the things that we practice where we see the genuine family, love, and friendship show up. And so, as a PNM, when you think about what matters, if someone asks you what your values are, think about what matters to you. Like, that's how I define, like, if I look at what are my key values, like what matters most to me and the people I surround myself with, and what I want to do every day, that can help me really define what I value in other humans, what I value in people I want to surround myself in, around. And so think about that. Like, what do I value? Think about your closest friends or your mentors, maybe, that you might have that have challenged you to try a school that you never thought you would go to. And what do you value in those people? How have they pushed you to be better? And then when you're in those moments in recruitment where you can take a deep breath and just look around, those chapters that you're with, the PNMs you're sitting around, do you see those same things in them? And I think that those moments in between are really key in finding the place where you're going to feel like you can be yourself all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Well, what
yeah.
I'm hearing you say in what matters to you is also what motivates you, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard. I mean, when I was leaving high school, I think I'd probably have a hard time saying what matters to me. Okay, faith probably matters to me a lot.
Yeah.
Family does. Like what else matters to me? Like what does that look like? But I think when we think about like, okay, what motivates me, if it's I'm super academically driven, well, what are you academically driven for? It's like, well, I'm like, I care a lot about like my future and stability. It's like, okay, great. Like that could be like correlated in this way. And I think even if you're listening and you are not like taking this I value assessment this
Yeah.
fall,
You don't
I
have to
think
take
it's
this
like,
to know.
I think it's so helpful to, I mean, every potential member I talk to wants to know, well, what do I need to do to be prepared? And I always want to tell them too, it's like, hey, I don't think you should script anything, but I do think you should like write down. I also give this like as career advice too, like write down like some of the most impactful moments in the last like 2 years of your life. For on the career side, it's more like write down like everything you've ever done professionally, right? But I think
Yeah.
when you have like a collection of memories readily available to
Yeah.
talk about, then you just feel more comfortable. It's like, oh yeah, like I took this awesome trip with my mom last winter that meant a lot to me. It's like, well, you have maybe a high drive or interest in adventure, like loyalty with relationships. And I think you can start looking for how those things can show up in the stories that you hear recruiters share about their experiences with sisters, and even the way like sorority enhances and elevates their care for some of those other things. Like I think for philanthropy, that's such a great example of I am sitting in this room hearing a presentation about the Alzheimer's Association, which is a disease I did not even know existed,
Right.
because
Right.
I'm very thankful to not be related or know anyone who's suffered from that form of dementia, right? And so I'm so thankful for that. But I am trying to, for the life of me, be empathetic to what's happening in this video when I have no connection to it. But if you look at some of the other sisters and their emotion for their other sisters who do have a family member who is dying from Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
Or like Tri Delta, right? They do so much work with St. Jude, and you like,
Yeah.
you're like looking at sisters connect with others who have a connection to that. You see friendship and love show up, right?
100%.
Or
Absolutely.
this sense of like loyalty and family. And
Yes.
I think I love the fact that you guys don't put descriptions on the values, because they manifest in so many different ways. Like
No, you can't. I don't think you can define one. Like, you might define faith differently than I do. And
totally.
faith shows up very frequently,
Yeah.
in the values too. It's in our top 10 that we see. But you might define faith differently than I do.
Yeah.
And that
Like
doesn't make.
hope versus a religion. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so it's like, we don't want to put definitions on to make you feel like this word and how this word is defined defines me, right? It's like, well, what emotion, and what you said about what motivates you, and when you can reflect back on things that maybe moments in your life that changed your life or impacted you or still mean a lot to you, you can pull from there why those moments mattered. And maybe I family showed up, and that was time and love, that I got to spend with my mom on this trip. And that trust was there too, all of those. Okay, so those things matter to me. How
Yeah.
then do those things that matter and that experience with my mom show up in these conversations or those moments that I see that the chapter members are having with one another? I
Yeah.
think, we talk so often about being prepared in what we're wearing and knowing who we are and what we're going to say and how we introduce ourselves. But
Sure.
I think sometimes if we just take a deep breath and think about what really matters to me and how can I find that in these organizations, it will also make going into recruitment not as daunting or
Yeah.
nerve-wracking. If we just take a deep breath and say, okay, I know who I am and I know what I need to become my best self. How can I find that in these chapters? That might make recruitment also less scary, because I was scared going into recruitment. I was really
Yeah.
nervous. I know P&Ms are, I know chapter members are. And so if we just take a deep breath and say, I know myself, I know what I need, and
Hmm.
that should be a focus when we go into recruitment, I think that that could definitely help.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think also it's really hard to balance. I know what I need with I'm open-minded to
Yeah.
recognize that like my needs could change
Yeah.
or there
Absolutely.
are other ways that my needs could be met, right? And so I think like a caution would be recognize like the root of your need, like try to get as deep as you can into it so it
Yeah.
doesn't manifest itself in surface level ways and
Absolutely.
gives you an open mind to see how your needs could be met. Specifically, just to put it bluntly, in chapters and with people who you don't initially like vibe with, right? Like if it's round one and you aren't thinking that this is the perfect chapter for you and they keep showing up round after round, maybe like consider what they might see in you that you haven't yet seen in them yet and go back to those values, go back to those needs and
Yeah.
explore how those could be met as you continue getting to know that chapter.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, to preface too, like 18-year-old Colleen and what she wanted was very different than what 22-year-old Colleen left college feeling like she had
Mm,
received. And both of those things are valid and they were okay,
yeah.
and I think that the sorority experience allowed me to grow in ways I never thought was possible. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad I gave it a chance and I didn't step away, because
Yeah.
I wanted and I needed people to challenge me and accept me for whatever decisions I was going to make. And they did. I didn't know that I needed that at the beginning of the process, but I'm so glad
Yeah.
that I got that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that being okay in having that flexibility of you're not going to find an organization that is going to meet 100% of what you want. And I think that that's good. I think that that's the best thing for us, and that organizations aren't going to check all of the boxes of what we think we want and need. And that's going to help us grow as humans and as people. And in college, it's going to help us really figure out who we are.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that perfect exists in the sorority experience. And so don't be searching for that. Search for
Yes.
something that's going to fill your cup and that is going to make you better, and that is going to be a place that you can show up and be yourself all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's going to help you grow and help you be the person that you're meant to be.
Yeah, that's so good. I think another piece of that is advocacy for your needs, right?
Ah,
Recognizing that there's not going to be a perfect chapter. And even your favorite chapter in round one, if they end up extending you a bid after preference and you join, I promise you, there will still be tension. There will still be heartache. There
always.
is no such thing as a perfect chapter. There's no such thing as a
Right.
perfect match, right? Like even on the back end, right? Like there is no such thing as a perfect match. And I just want to encourage any potential members listening that there is room for you to advocate for yourself and stand up for the things that you need before bid day and after. Like that does not end on bid day, identifying what you need to be successful, because I believe that you already have, like PNMs listening, already have everything that you need to be successful in recruitment. You have the clothes that you need, right?
Yep.
You have the experience, you have the heart, you have the values, you have the readiness to contribute to something bigger than yourself.
Mhm.
So I think like even as we like round out our time together, I think it would be so helpful to like leave our friends with some like really practical advice around how they can go into this process, like a little, like de-escalate that stress a little bit and the anxiety that they feel around needing to be perfect or present themselves in a way that maybe even is like a facade of who they truly are. Do you have any like tips for our PNMs leaving from anywhere in the experience? I know you guys also work closely with like the registration form and like throughout the process.
Yeah.
Anything that like runs the gamut?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, so many things are flying through my head, Cassie. I think number one is you're not the only one that's nervous. Just take a deep breath. Chapter members are nervous to meet you. They're looking for the right members, just like you're looking for the right chapter. And so we're all a little bit nervous going into this process, even if, you know, you walk in and you're like, this is overwhelming, they're overwhelmed too. So just take a deep breath and say,
Panhellenics nervous too, right? Like they're trying to create an experience for
advisors
you.
are. As an advisor, I was always nervous. Did everybody get their schedule? You know, so nerves abound. It is okay to be nervous. Take a deep breath and say, we're all nervous together, and that's all right. I think number two is that I find, and I don't want to lump every woman or person who identifies as a woman into this, but I find that often women overthink things more than men. We overthink recruitment. We lay out our outfits and we lay out, okay, what am I going to wear? And does this match? Does this meet what they're saying this round is supposed to be? Does my resume look okay? Did I put a period where it was supposed to be? Is that going to be, am I going to be judged for that? If I submit a picture, you know, does my hair match what it still looks like today? I remember one time I was running a recruitment process and a mom called and said, my daughter just dyed her hair and it doesn't match her headshot. We have to change it. I said, it's really okay. It's not the hair that's going to get her to join the chapters that she wants. So we overthink even the smallest details. And when we think about our registration process, you know, take a deep breath, look at the registration, copy paste those questions, and it does not have to be a long essay. Just get to the point of who you are. And if it's 3 sentences of, in high school, I was really involved in student council. I was on my high school dance team, which brought me leadership. And I also did service with my church, or I did service with my local Girl Scout troop. You know, those 3 things show involvement, they show leadership, they show dedication. And those are all things that chapters are looking for. You don't need to write paragraphs and paragraphs to say who you are, because that's going to give them a precursor to then when they meet you, they're going to know a little bit about you and they want to hear it in your own words. They want to hear it in your own voice. So you don't have to overthink the registration process. Just get down to the bare bones of, this is what I did and this is what I learned or what I gained from it. And then that's going to give them enough to when they first talk to you, they really just want to hear it in your own voice. So overthink things. We're nervous. Just take a deep breath. Everyone's nervous. You don't have to overthink the recruitment process. And then ultimately, I love what you said earlier, Cassie, about thinking of those moments that mattered to you in your life. Remember those moments. And when you go into recruitment, could you see those moments happening with the people that you're talking to? Could you see new moments happening with those people? Imagine that. And that'll help guide you through the process.
Oh, so good. I love all that advice that you shared. And I think that I agree. I do think women have a tendency of overthinking things. Like if you haven't seen the Barbie movie yet, you should. Have you seen it yet?
I have. Yes. Yes,
so
I
good.
have. It was so good.
And I think like we talked about this on the podcast earlier this week, but the whole concept of like, it's literally impossible to be a woman because we're like living in this like constant conflict of priorities and expectations. It's so important to remember that it is so important for you to be honed in on what matters to you throughout the process, like elevating your values in every step, right? From how you prepare. And I even think sometimes like I like to plan. I do like to plan. So I think balancing like planning with overthinking, like if it does like clear your mind to know what you're going to wear every day, like, and not have to wake up and decide, then do it. Like lay it all out. But like after you like get dressed and like finish your hair and makeup, try not to think about it the rest of the day, right? Like maybe like go check out your face after lunch or whatever, just to like make like feel confident again. But try to like cover your bases in the morning and leave the rest to just like be so present in conversations and allow your true self to shine the rest of the day. I think that was something that I tried to do on the recruiter side. It's like, okay, I got ready. I'm going to stop thinking about this for the rest of the day. If one
Absolutely.
hair is out of place, that's not going to prevent a P&M from wanting to be in our chapter. The same goes for P&Ms. Like if one of your hairs are out of place or you have a little mascara on your eyelid, like they can look past it. They're like just trying their best too.
Well, I'll leave you with this, Cassie. One of the things that I talk to chapter members about that I'd love for P&Ms to think about is first impressions matter. Sure. It's like when you go into an interview, you know, your resume matters or whatever, how people see you. But what matters most is the lasting impression you leave someone with. So after you finish a conversation, that chapter member is not going to remember if you were wearing lipstick or if your hair was out of place or your shirt was tucked in. They're going to remember what they felt about the conversation you had. And that lasting impression that you leave someone with, but then that you also leave with when you leave a chapter is what matters more than anything else. Doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter how great your makeup looks, because if it's summer recruitment, we're all going to be sweating, right?
Yeah.
It's what you leave with, that feeling that if you had such a great conversation with that chapter member, that's what they're leaving with too. And that's what matters more than anything. It matters more than your hair and your outfit, is the lasting impression. First impressions matter, absolutely. But what I believe matters most is the lasting impression, the feeling that someone walks away with after that interaction with you. And so what lasting impressions are you walking away with, and are they walking away with after your conversations? That is the thing that's going to matter more than anything else.
I love that.
Yeah.
The lasting impression is what matters most. And I agree with you. First impressions matter, right? We want to put our best foot forward, but that best foot forward won't carry you the rest of the way, right?
Right.
It's the rest of the time that you spend together. And I love this. Like, I don't even know where I heard this, like strive to be more interested, less interesting, right?
Yes.
Even as a potential new member, like you are trying to gain information and insight and understanding from these recruiters to their lived experiences in sorority. That requires you to ask questions too. If it feels like an interview, throw a question back at them, right? Like get to understand them, and not just them from the sense of like who they are to the chapter that you are visiting in that round, but who they are as a person and like what has drawn them to this organization just because of who they are.
Absolutely. And I'm sure chapter members want to be asked questions because they're long days. Like if we mix it up and we give that space for them to be themselves, too, that's really fun.
I love that. Well, Colleen, it was such a delight to connect with you today. Thanks for making the time. If potential members want to connect with you or ask you follow-up questions or follow you on social media, where can they do that?
Sure. They can follow me on Instagram. I'm Colleen G2B. So the letter G, the number 2, and a B on the end. So they can follow me there. Most of the pictures are about my lovely little children and my travels with Fired Up, but I would love to have new followers and friends on there, and hope to connect with everybody soon.
Awesome. Well, have a great recruitment season, Colleen.
Thanks. You too, everybody, and best of luck to everyone.